Hello, and welcome back to gas exchange. So we're finishing up the respiratory system today, day 2 of the respiratory system. So I want you to go ahead and open up your notes, and before you continue on with this lesson, I want you to think about and maybe write down what are the 3 components of physiological respiration. This is what we learned last class. So take a second, write that down, pause if you need to. And hopefully you wrote down these 3 things. Ventilation, which is the physical act of breathing. Gas exchange, which is the exchange of gas between the alveoli and the capillaries. And cell respiration, which is when that oxygen actually gets to your cells, to your mitochondria, and you use that oxygen to create ATP energy. So those are those 3 steps of physiological respiration. Okay. My meme is basically the same thing. Me, after realizing that everyone who reads this meme is now breathing manually. Sorry. So your guiding questions for today. 1, what muscles cause us to breathe in and out? What are the actual muscles involved in breathing? And 2, what problems do lung diseases cause? So again, you can come up with why this matters in life. Lung diseases are really common, and can be really detrimental. So it should be relatively interesting today, hopefully. But let's just jump right into breathing mechanisms. How does your body actually breathe? So breathing is going to be the active movement of the muscles in your respiratory system, and it enables air to move in and out of the lungs. And the reason that this happens is because when your respiratory muscles contract, it actually changes the volume of your thoracic cavity, which we're just going to call the chest. But if you ever see it as thorax or thoracic cavity, it's just talking about your chest. So when it actually changes the volume of your thoracic cavity, it causes differences in pressure, and that is why air can move in versus out. So if you thought you were done with chemistry, sorry, chemistry is everywhere. I was a chemistry minor, so I love chemistry. But the reason that you can breathe is literally because of Boyle's law, which you learned about in 10th grade. Boyle's law is the law that pressure is inversely related to volume, which this picture beautifully sums up Boyle's law. If you have an area of space and you increase the volume of that space, then the pressure is going to be decreased because those gas molecules have more room to move around, so the pressure is decreased, versus if you push down and you reduce the volume of space, so the volume has decreased, but the pressure is going to increase because those molecules have less space to move around. The exact same thing is happening every single time you breathe in and breathe out. But it's just depending on when the pressure is greater or lower than outside. And that's what we're going to learn. So when the volume of the chest increases, the pressure in the chest decreases. So just right here, when the volume of our chest increases, the pressure decreases. And when the volume of our chest decreases, the pressure in the chest increases. And now we're going to talk about what does that look like when you're actually breathing. So gases always want to move from a region of high pressure to a region of low pressure, super similar to when we talk about passive transport, from a high concentration gradient to a low concentration gradient. So whenever there's really high pressure, a gas wants to get away from it and go to the place where there's low pressure. So when the pressure in the chest is less than the pressure in the atmosphere, then air is going to move into the lungs. This is inspiration, or when you're inhaling. So if we go back and look at here, when the volume of the chest increases, the pressure in the chest decreases. So when your volume of your chest increases, that's when you breathe in. You're creating more space in your chest, and when you do that, the pressure in your chest goes down because there's more space. And when the pressure in your chest goes down, it's below the atmospheric pressure. So the air in the air in the atmosphere enters your lungs because it's going from an area of high pressure, which is in the atmosphere, into your lungs, which is an area of low pressure. And then if we look at the next part, when the pressure in the chest is greater than the atmosphere, air will move out of the lungs. This is expiration or exhalation. So when you breathe out, I have to breathe in first. When you breathe out, you're creating higher pressure inside of your chest because the volume of your chest is decreasing, which is happening right here. that's where the volume is going to decrease. And when the volume decreases, the pressure inside of your chest increases, and it's going to expel the air out of your lungs. So that's expiration. And here's a pretty cool video of this. So, and I have a more fun fact, but first we'll do the fun fact. So the pressure of the atmosphere is lower at really high altitudes. And because of this, it takes a greater increase in chest volume before you create that pressure differential. So it actually makes it harder to breathe at high altitudes. And so that's kind of what leads to altitude sickness, if you've heard of that. But what's interesting is the body will adapt mechanisms to basically improve oxygen uptake under these high altitude conditions. And that's why a lot of athletes will often go and train in high altitude areas prior to competitions, because it helps them increase their ability to carry oxygen to their cells, which is pretty cool. Here is a video of this pressure differential that I talked about. I'm going to slow it down. Of course, it's going to go really fast here. But so if we watch the first part of it right here, this is when the individual is breathing in. So as you're breathing in, you're creating, if you see this arrow pointing out, you're creating volume in the chest, which is going to decrease the pressure in the chest, which is going to mean that the air outside, the air in the atmosphere is at a higher pressure. It's going to want to move from high to low pressure. So you inhale air moves into the body. And opposite happens when you breathe out, which we're going to see here. So your chest volume is decreasing. You are kind of expelling the air from your chest. So you're creating really high pressure inside of your chest. And so the air is going to want to move from this high pressure area out into the low pressure atmosphere. All right, sweet. So now we're going to talk about, okay, what muscles are involved in this movement of air. So inspiration, which is inhaling, and expiration, which is exhaling, are controlled by two sets of what we call antagonistic muscle groups. They're just called antagonistic because they work oppositely. So when your inspiratory muscles are contracting, your expiratory muscles are relaxing, and vice versa. This is basically a summary of the muscles I'm going to teach you about. And you can come back to this part of the video or this slide if you need to. But the muscles that are going to be used in inspiration are going to be the external intercostals and the diaphragm. The intercostals are muscles that are around your ribs. And then the muscles of expiration are going to be your internal intercostals and your diaphragm, and also your abdominal muscles. So let's look at these muscles real quick. The muscles responsible for inspiration, so inhaling, are your diaphragm and your external intercostals. Your diaphragm muscles are going to contract, and when your diaphragm muscles, this can be confusing sometimes, but when your diaphragm contracts, what happens is your diaphragm is normally kind of shaped like a U when it's relaxed, and when it contracts, it actually flattens out. And so when it flattens out, it causes the volume of your chest to increase. So if you look at this picture, it's a great picture of it, because you can see where the diaphragm normally would be if it's resting, but as it contracts, it actually flattens, which increases the volume of the chest, which allows air to move in, which is pretty cool. And then your external intercostals are going to contract. So these are those rib cage muscles, and you see they're contracting, and they actually pull upwards and outwards, which expands the chest as well. And some additional muscle groups also help pull the ribs up and out. Those are the sternocleidomastoids and the pectoralis minor. I made that small because you don't need to know those, okay? But just know the diaphragm contracts and your external intercostals contract, and it expands the volume of the chest because it's trying to increase the volume, which means decrease the pressure. And on the opposite side of that, we have the expiratory or the expiration muscles. So the muscles that are responsible for expiration are your abdominal muscles and your internal intercostals. Your diaphragm is also involved in this, but it's when your diaphragm's relaxing. So when the diaphragm relaxes, it goes from being flat and opening up the chest to going back to that U shape, and it's actually decreasing the volume of the chest, which means increasing the pressure. And if we increase the pressure, then the air is going to want to exhale, get out of your body. Your internal intercostals are going to contract and they pull the ribs inwards and downwards. So you see these arrows are pointing down. So it's pulling the ribs down to contract those lungs, contract the chest, and force air out. And your abdominal muscles are going to contract down here, which also pushes the diaphragm upward. And that happens more during forced exhalation, which is more happening like during exercise when you're breathing really heavily. And some other groups that might be involved to help pull the ribs down are the quadratus lumborum, but you need to know that one. Okay, so that is the mechanisms of breathing. You should now understand how the muscles contract and relax to help you breathe. So please reach out to me if you have any questions about that. I know it can be kind of confusing with the pressure volume stuff, but if you can just remember that pressure and volume are inversely related, that should help. I'm actually going to go back and show you this picture again because I think it's the best one. So just knowing both of these pictures here are great, that when you breathe in, you're expanding your chest, so the volume's increasing, which means the pressure is going down. And then opposite, when you breathe out, your chest is contracting, so you're decreasing the volume, increasing the pressure. And then if you can remember that pressure, that air is going to move from high to low pressure, then you should be good. Okay, let's finish this off with some learning about some lung diseases. So the first we're going to learn about is lung cancer. So lung cancer is just like any other cancer. It's the uncontrolled cell division of lung cells, and it leads to abnormal growth of a lung tissue, which we would call a tumor. So this would be a CAT scan of a patient's lungs, looking top down, and this would be that lung tumor that you can see there. Tumors can cause normal tissue function to stop, and they can also either remain in place, so just stay in the lungs, or they can spread to other regions of the body. When they stay in place, we call that a benign tumor, and when they spread to other regions, you call that malignant. Usually malignant cancers are more difficult to fight. Lung cancers are one of the most common cancers, and also one of the most common cause of cancer-related deaths worldwide, and that's for two main reasons. The first being that lungs are vital to normal bodily function. So this is also why things like coronavirus is really scary, because it's a respiratory disease, and without your lungs functioning, the rest of your body cannot function, because your lungs are carrying that oxygen to the rest of your body, which is vital to any bodily process. That's why the respiratory system is extremely important and why respiratory diseases can be really dangerous. Secondly, your lungs have a ton of blood supply. Every single blood cell that is flowing through your body has to flow through your lungs at some point, because it's got to be delivering that carbon dioxide waste to the lungs to be expelled, and it's also got to be picking up that oxygen. So because of that, if you have lung cancer, it really increases the likelihood of that cancer spreading to other parts of your body, because every single blood cell flows through that place of the body. And that's when cancer spreads, we call that metastasis. So what are some causes of lung cancer? Y'all probably know this. There are many causes. Smoking is one of the biggest causes, asbestos, air pollution, some infections, and also genetic predispositions. And here's some other pictures: radiation, genetics, occupation. So depending on like your, the environments that you're in, aging, pollution, asbestos, tobacco, environment, diseases, and smoke are all some causes of lung cancer. Oh no, what happened to my slides? Hold on. Okay, we're back. All right, so my slides are back. The next lung disorder that I'm going to talk about is emphysema. So emphysema is a lung condition where the walls of the alveoli lose their elasticity due to damage of the alveolar walls, and basically what happens is it causes the alveoli to, they're normally like little tiny sacs in the lung. They kind of all start to merge together and they get really large. And when they get really large, what that means is now we have a lower surface area for gas exchange. So that means that your bodily cells are getting less oxygen. So if you look at this lung, you can see all these really large spots. That's where all the alveoli can kind of have sort of collapse in on each other. And this can be really dangerous because it means that your body is struggling to get enough oxygen. So it causes holes to develop, and the alveoli merge into these really huge air spaces in your lungs. And some symptoms include shortness of breath, which would make sense because you're kind of struggling to get that air. A lot of phlegm production, expansion of the rib cage because your body's trying to get more air into those lungs. Cyanosis is when especially like your outer limbs, so like your fingers and toes, start to turn like a bluish purple. And the reason they turn bluish purple is because they do not have enough oxygen, and also increase susceptibility to chest infections. The major cause of emphysema is smoking. That's really the major cause of it, because the chemical irritants in smoke and other smokes damage the alveolar walls. And damage to the lung tissue leads to the recruitment of phagocytes to the region, which we learned about in the immune system. And then the phagocytes go and start to attack the damaged lung tissue and create an inflammatory response trying to solve the problem. But what it actually ends up doing is creating these really large airspace holes. And it basically breaks down those alveolar walls and creates these large air sockets, which make it really difficult to breathe. Not fun. So that is all I have for you on the respiratory system. Your activity for today is to just do the exit ticket on gas exchange. And other than that, I hope y'all have an awesome day. And there's my other meme. Oh, you're studying the respiratory system? What an inspiration. Get it? Inspiration, inhalation, ha ha ha. Okay, log into office hours to ask me any questions and say hello. As always, I miss y'all. Hopefully you know that. Reach out if you need anything. Have an awesome week, y'all. Bye.